You are amazing for coming out tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Simulation. My name is Alan Sakian. So, how many of you guys have been to a simulation event before? Yeah, okay, cool, cool. How many is this the first one? Couple? Yeah, there we go. Good stuff. So, all right, simulations, rebirthing the public intellectual, inspiring you to build the future. We do so through a multidisciplinary daily show and live event series, and we hope to fill sports stadiums with curious intellectuals. So we'll get there together. All right. Now, this is our first production called Women in Alliance. We are super excited for this. It's coming at an incredibly crazy time. It's just nuts that it's so landed to be on this time. I have a deep amount of respect for women, and especially three women that are joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to be able to be with just strong women that are leaving their stamp on Earth. And that's what we're doing here. We're going to be having a panelist discussion about that and about the importance of that and how we can help actualize women into our world and integrate some of the trauma that we've went through. And I am looking forward to this discussion with you. And we'll have some Q&A at the end as well. So get ready for some cool Q&A. And all right, let's introduce Alan first from WorkWise. And Alan is going to come and say a couple words.
Thank you, Alan. Welcome up here at WorkWise. It's so exciting to have simulation back in our location here again. Tonight's panel in particular is one that I've been looking forward to for a long time. As diversity within the workplace, and particularly for us as a very early stage business, it's been super hard to actually get and to achieve. Diversity around race, not so difficult for us. But gender balance across an early stage company has been incredibly difficult. And it's something very close to my heart. So excited to have you ladies here. Fantastic to have simulation here again. And just come in part of the where we are intersecting between the changes in the way of work, the changes in organizational structures, and a real movement around how we need to become very human-centric in our workspace and in our lives. So, without any more, I'll pass back over to the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Woo! Woo! And we've had several comments already today about people walking in and going, okay, what is this place? This place is amazing. And they're really at the cutting edge of the future of work. Check them out, workwise.com. All right, so let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. Okay, so we're going to start over here with Mariana Saenko. Mariana is a principal at Coastal Ventures, and she was formerly at DFJ. And there is so much more to unpack, but focus aerospace, future of food, robotics. So, all right, let's give it up for Mariana. Woo! And we have Mckenzie Slaughter joining us in the middle. Mckenzie is the founder of Beyond Capital Markets and Pro House Capital as well. And also a lot of focus on blockchain and crypto and social impact. Round of applause. And lastly, we have Nicole Bradford at the end. Nicole is Executive Director of the Transformative Technology Lab, and she's also at the Willow Group as well, founder of Willow Group, and also formerly at Blizzard. So exciting stuff. Let's give Nicole a round of applause. All right. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Thanks for having us. Yes.
And then, yep, click, and we're good to go. And Mckenzie, you're on too? Awesome, yes. Beautiful. Okay. I feel like we should take a moment to just, I'm so cerebral myself. I'm always in my head. So when I have the opportunity to just, take a breath and get into my body and my heart a little more, if you guys want to join me. Huge thank you for coming, everyone, and especially you three. You're huge role models to me and to so many others, and I am blessed to be able to pass respect to you. And I've recently was taught that by someone that, a very powerful woman that I know, that she cares more about being respected. would you maybe touch on that a little bit as we enter into the first part of the conversation, which is about what is going on in the world with the feminine energy coming into more places in our work, in our relationships, in our business, and in technology, and what that is looking like?
Ooh, you're all looking at me. I don't know why.
Whatever order you want.
Maybe it's because I work in venture capital. I think respect is something that everybody craves, and it's not gender biased, right? It's just that I think that there are certain groups that are disenfranchised for one reason or another, and one of the ways that we show aggression as humans in self-similar groups versus, us versus other is by disrespect. And so I think that in our environments, in our social environments, in our family environments, in our work environments, we aim to feel included, and that inherently means some level of respect. And so I don't actually think respect is a gender thing, because I more often see, like for me, I feel more disrespected because I'm young sometimes in my profession than because I'm a female. And honestly, I found that it's really nice to be in a technical profession or have a technical background, because you can slap someone into reality real fast by just saying, I don't really care what your preconceptions of me are, but here are the 10 reasons that you're wrong, and I can derive it from first principles if you need. But that's a privilege of my position and my profession and the work I do. And I gather that can be very difficult depending on how you place yourself in the world.
Okay, well, I think that respect is not, it's not a moral standard these days. I think people, when you meet people, whether it's work or in your personal life, they just sometimes, not everybody, sometimes they just don't, sometimes the bar is just not set very high when you first meet someone. So it's our goal as individuals, not just women, but it's our goal as individuals to teach people how they should treat you when you first meet them. And so that's how I tackle respect, because I get all kind of responses based on my industry. In my industry, I'm in finance and technology, so I'm not supposed to look like this in this space. So I get inundated with that. I get, it's a male-dominant industry, so I get inundated with that. And so I'm not the stereotype, so you just have to be stern. You don't have to be rude or anything like that. It's just, you just kind of show people who you are in the very beginning. And I think that's how you get respect, and then be consistent about it too. So I think that's how you get that respect.
I would say if I had to choose between respect and access to opportunity, access to education and capital, I would take the opportunity. I don't have to be friends with people. So it's really more about, it's not a desire, it's not an insistence on equal outcomes, it's an insistence on equal opportunity, because if I have the opportunity, I'm going to get it done. And so ideally, yes, I would love to have respectful working relationships with people, and I would love to have that. But, I think one of the things that we are, we're in the transition right now. I think this is a really big transition time, and I actually do think things are changing. Social norms are changing. This is what I call the crunch in a lot of different areas. And so, it's going to be uncomfortable for some people, but it's really all about getting access to the opportunity in order to, create the companies and the programs that can actually change the world. And that matters to me more than, whether or not someone's nice to me.
That's a really great answer, that we absolutely need the equality of opportunity for everyone to be able to pursue what actualizes them into the world, and that might even trump respect then. It's a good answer. And then we started kind of endeavoring into the even before we endeavor into the transition, there was also the comment about just what we do about teaching the children that are coming into the world about respect and the golden rule of treating others how you want to be treated. Okay, let's unpack the transition more. So what do you see happening in the workplace? I mean, Nicole, you were just rattling off numbers to me earlier about the amount of females that hold leadership positions now in the companies that that are in your ecosystem, and that also are either investors or the co-founders. This is all very exciting stuff, and same thing with the organizations that you two are working with. So tell us about this transition and what that is bringing into society.
Yeah, so just to give everybody context, I work in what we call transformative technology. And so that is tech that is designed to support mental health, emotional well-being, and human thriving. And so specifically, that's mental health, stress, anxiety, depression. For emotional well-being, that's happiness, loneliness, connection, meaning-making, social emotional skills, the ability to emotionally self-regulate, self-awareness. And then on human thriving, that's actually really expanding the mental and emotional capacity of humans. So that can be everything from brain-computer interface to brain-to-brain communication, all of the things that would take down the friction in society and expand what humans are capable of being and doing. And so important to note that 2/3 of those things are not about are not about issues, it's about what's possible for humanity. So it's not just mental health. Sometimes people think it's just mental health. It's broader than that. And the reason why I give that background is that we just finished, we have a lab, a conference, and an academy, and we just finished a global call for entrepreneurs and innovators who are interested in this area, because I was getting emails from people all over the world, and so I had the sense that it was global. And that's proven to be true. We recruited over 1,000 people, and they're from 69 countries, 450 cities. 20% of them are what we categorized as entrepreneurs. And to do that, we had a high bar. They had to have a very clearly defined transformative technology product, and they had to be working on it full time. And then the rest are innovators who are interested from places, and everyone's from places that you might not expect. We had quite a lot of people from Africa, Southeast Asia, like outside of what people traditionally think. But for our entrepreneurs, I'm really excited about these stats. I had them, updated and calculated for today. For our entrepreneurs, 50% had one female founder. 50% of the companies had one female founder, defined as more than 10% of equity. 86%, 25% of the staff are female. 59% had one female investor. 84% have one female advisor. And 48% have one female external board member. And I think what's really important about this is that it wasn't a gendered call. We didn't say, hey, all the women who are interested in transformative technology. We said, we are interested in the future of human possibility and the future of the human mind. And this is who responded to that call, which we did a lot of serious networking throughout all of the tech ecosystems to find these people. And so I think what's happening, to get back to the original question about what the transition and the crunch that we're in, is that we are in a period of time where the stakes are very high. And I think lots of people recognize.
Tell us about those stakes.
Yeah, well, I think lots of people recognize when the stakes are high, but I think especially women also recognize when the stakes are high.
And what are you
women are highly
to?
Engaged in that.
What are the stakes?
Well, I mean, the biggest stakes I think that it's coming is that one of your questions is sort of like, what are the 3 biggest problems? So I'm kind of jumping ahead, but those are the stakes. Okay. So one is the future of the human mind, which I'll dig into in a second. The other one is climate and the things driving it, so energy generation, food production, and waste disposal. And then the other one is the economic structure and a lot of the things that are being pushed on by the rise of automation and what that's going to do to the future of work and what it's going to take to be employable in the future, and the social instability that's possible but not deterministic. We can do something about it. And so the future of the human mind is the thing that really makes the difference. It's probably also the root cause of everything else. So you don't get to solve those other problems without addressing the human mind. And so that's why I think we have so many women who are interested.
And we'll unpack that as we go more. What about you guys on transition?
Yeah, I want to follow up on that before I forget my thought. But the stakes are high, but I also think that women are agents of change. And so economically, the stakes are high for everyone, but it's women that's really feeling the pain. I'm going to try to do this in order and not be sporadic, but just to give you some background on me, I've been in fintech or financial innovation for the past 10 years. I started Beyond Capital Markets back in 2010, a year after my first company, Poorhouse Capital, which is an alternative investment firm. Beyond Capital Markets started out as doing research, and then we doing research for hedge funds and private equity funds. And then we kind of pivoted into fintech. So I have a background in tech and started coding at NASA Langley when I was 18. And then I also have an MBA in finance, so kind of put those two together. One of the projects, we have a lab at Poorhouse Capital, Poorhouse Labs, which is a fintech lab. One of our biggest projects to date is Beauty and the Bull, which is a social trading platform for women that we started around 2012, launched in 2013. We had a really hard time with adoption. Women are busy. Women have a lot going on. So it's been a struggle, but when cryptocurrency came around, all these women wanted to just invest immediately. They just immediately got it, and something just snapped in our brains. And women just innately understand cryptocurrency. I don't think the stock market is organic to us from my observations in finance. But I think because of this cryptocurrency and blockchain wave, what I'm also seeing with women in being agents of change in this economic transition that we're going through, I am bullish on blockchain and cryptocurrency, obviously, but but also I see women wanting to be fund managers, analysts, and really doing the grunt work that it's going to take to get our government to start acting like a civilized government and make, civilized regulations, and so we don't look like an embarrassment globally, which is what we do right now. It's how we look right now. But it's the women that are...
There's far worse people than us.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But anyways, that's just my opinion. But I think women are open and kind of used to doing the grunt work, right? And being that foundation. So in Beyond Capital Markets, we do a lot of things. Right now, we are focused on two things. We have an investment fund platform where we focus on tokenizing funds. So anything from a hedge fund or a venture capital fund or a real estate fund, we tokenize that on the blockchain. We also have an academy because it's really important to educate the investors and also create analysts, just to create the infrastructure, the operational infrastructure of this industry if we want to be taken seriously. And yesterday, believe it or not, I was in New York City. I had an event with SAP and Acon, and I promoted this Beyond Academy that we have, which is a certification program to become a blockchain analyst or a fund manager. And I got this big rush, and it was mostly women. So, and they shared their stories with me. Some of them, just moved here with a background in private equity, but they want to do social good. They don't know where to go because there's no companies out there. There's no finance companies out there that want to be socially good all the time. Maybe once in a while. And there's some women that are accountants or some that are data scientists, and they want to figure out how to make social impact filtered into finance and investing. So I think women are the future. Maybe it is a sign of the times, a position of the sun and the moon, whatever, but I think it's our time. So. And I think it's our time. I think the first part is going to be finance, because that's the biggest pain everyone's having right now. And then from there, everything will kind of flow from there. So I agree with you. Climate change is really big, and agriculture and food security is really, really big.
You're making me realize how maybe if not jaded, extremely constrained my worldview is, because I've literally the exact opposite experience in the blockchain space.
Okay.
Which is most of the women who I know who are in venture capital are running in the other direction from it, and very, very few of the projects that come and pitch to me for startup equity or first SAFT, simple agreements for future tokens, which is a slightly nonsense documentation, but we can talk about that at some point. Very few, there's just no protections on either side. It's a very weird, but cross your fingers and pray to whoever your preferred deity is that the whole thing works out. But I have very few experiences of female, lots of amazing female founders in lots of industries, particularly in anything to do with brain mind, health stuff. But when it comes to blockchain, literally zero. It's crazy to me. It's I think I've met one woman in the last year who came and pitched what for me was kind of an interesting project. But the rest of them, it's the most stereotypical, everyone kind of looks the same project. So I'm curious that
I mean, the funds, the crypto funds that we're raising for is 100% men. I hate to say that, but
I was like, who are you talking
men.
to? I want to talk to them.
It's 100% men, but it's the women that we're talking to. See, we're ecosystem builders, so we're talking to women that you would never think had an interest in blockchain. They're not necessarily techies or founders, and we don't have a lot of women in blockchain that are founders and building dApps and all that stuff. And I think that I don't have a problem with that, because if we're building everything around it that supports the companies, and to gets them to be the next fund managers or board members or whoever, I think those are better.
I'll counter you on that point. I think I have a massive problem with it because groups inherently create bias. And it's nobody's fault, right? If you just sit around the table and everyone has the same perspective, you just build bias into the thing that you're building. Right. This is super common in AI groups. I run into this all the time where people are like, I don't know, I have this great facial recognition system. It works perfectly. And it's yeah, it's because your test net was all of the white dudes who work in your office. And so when you put anyone of color or any gender, it doesn't work at all, right? And it fails in catastrophic ways. So I worry about this particularly when it comes to distributed systems, because the way that we think about social trust systems, multi-layered party hierarchy, I think it falls naturally into some of the inherent rules and constructs that we navigate in certain societies by. And then when you pick up that team and you're great, but now we're going to first deploy this in Singapore or Colombia or wherever else, it just culturally fails in all sorts of basically catastrophic fashions. And I think a lot of that is because on the tech side, we have very, very little diversity in these projects. And so people aren't thinking about the larger implementation challenges.
Right. So I agree with you on that. But I still think we're tackling the problem in the wrong way. I'm a part of the problem, or have been a part of the problem until I figured it out. But I think we've been doing a bottom-top, what is that? Yeah, that's right, bottom-to-top approach. And I don't know, just one day I was thinking, well, what if I focused on the top and trickled it down to the bottom?
No, I deeply appreciate what you're doing. I get it. I'm how do we also, if I'm working from the bottom, how do I help you?
I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so my other company, ProHouse Capital, we decided over these years, we were kind of toying with creating this big fintech VC fund and being venture capitalists, because everybody wants to be a venture capitalist, right?
Kidding.
Yeah.
I'm so kidding.
Everybody wants to be a venture capitalist, yeah. But where the real opportunity is being a capital provider. So we decided to just go for it, and so we're raising a $1 billion fund of funds, and with that we have education as well. People need to be educated, and so we've been working with state pensions that will mandate state pensions and insurance companies, et cetera, they have these mandates that they have to work with women and minority fund managers or investment analysts or whatever. So we're using that strategy, and if we can raise $1 billion and funnel that money down to women like you, female fund managers or female investment professionals, then that will hopefully change the bias from the top, and then the founders will be forced to change, or they don't get any money. So that's the hypothesis.
I appreciate your vision.
So we have and there was a good conversation, a good counters. I like that. And within the transition, we have some problems that we see and problems that we want to solve and augment to make it better. And we also have really good experiences. Maybe we talk about some personal experiences that we think are moving us in the right direction, some of the things that we're like still face palming. I'd love to unpack a little bit of that.
Good experiences.
With the transition. With the transition.
Well, it's interesting. The other day I meditated a lot. And so one of the things that comes from one of the practices that I get is that I can kind of tell when I'm getting triggered about something really fast before it even happens. And I find that one of the things that triggers me a little bit is statements about men are like this and women are like that, or these are masculine traits or these are feminine traits. And this is the feminine, this is the masculine. Because whenever I look at that list, a lot of the traits that say masculine are just like stuff I do every day, and I'm like, but I don't feel masculine. I reject that. Or, my father was my primary caregiver for many years while my mother was in law school. And one of his points of pride was, braiding my hair without a crooked scalp. So I have my experience of the man who raised me, along with my mother, was incredibly nurturing and incredibly hands-on and, and so loving, and a man, and so I just think, I think that one of the things that I'm glad that seems to be coming, being addressed a little bit or changing is that I think that these definitive descriptions about this is men are like this and women are like this, I think, I think it's unfair to women because it creates a double standard for, how women can behave and how men can behave. And I also think that it stifles men too, in the sense that, there are a lot of men with extraordinarily juicy hearts, and I don't think that means that, why is that feminine? Why is that not masculine to have an extraordinarily juicy heart? And so
I like that juicy heart.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of that stuff is starting to shift, and not just on the coast. I see it in different places, and I cover a lot of ground because I'm a scanner, and I scan for sort of cultural trends, social trends, and I would say if someone said, "What's your superpower?" It's that I feel like I have a sense of snow. I can tell when something's coming by looking at all of these social trends, and so it's something that you see happening. And so I think that's a big part of the transition, and that gives me a lot of encouragement. And there's so many men who are standing up. There's so many men who are. There's so many male, allies to this idea of, equal access to opportunity. And so I'm really inspired. And I also am there are things that I'm really encouraged by. And I'm going to say something that maybe I shouldn't.
Do it. Safe
Do it.
space.
So, yeah.
Minus the cameras.
Yeah, so, okay, I'm just going to say it, but you have to, whoever you are watching on the internet, you have to listen to the whole thing. It's basically that I don't find Jordan Peterson offensive. And the reason why is because I don't agree with anything he says. I don't agree with anything he says. Well, there's some things. He blends a lot of stuff. But what he does, what he says to me is that Humanity is hungry for a new narrative. Humanity is hungry for a new narrative. The historical structures have passed away. If you look at the Edelman Trust Index and what people used to believe in, things are changing. Belief and faith in, religion, governments, higher education as salvation. If you think of all the people who are in debt for, you talk to college students in America about how they feel about higher education. I believe in higher education, but I'm just saying, it's like if you look at what people trust in, what they believe in, the sand is shifting. And so when I see, this person who I don't agree with, but the enthusiasm for what he has to say, I see that as enthusiasm for a new narrative. People are looking for something, and they're looking for a structure. And I think that at the point that we can collectively come up with a new narrative for humanity, for Team Human, and what this all is about, I think the ability to cause or to have a collective shift is actually easier than it has been historically. And so what I see when I look at the social swirls, not just in the US, because I track things all over the world, is there's a confluence of need, demand, and means for shifting the human mind. And I think that is that it has to go along with economics and it has to go along with other things. But I think we have an opportunity. And, it isn't, the future of the world is not written, but it's being written right now. And so I think this is the most exciting time and one of the most important times to be alive.
Humanity's hungry for a new narrative. I like that
yes.
one. And the future is being built right now. And you said you took a very international approach to how things were in Mariana. I think I heard you a little bit play with this when you said that there are places in the world where things are still worse. And I do firmly believe that to be very true, and that we are moving the standards up. But the United States is absolutely not the worst, but we could be a better role model, and this is what we're discussing now. So with the narrative, being hungry for a new narrative, I'd like to open up for you two to speak on that for a little bit. What do you think about that? And what do you think that looks like?
My answer is very short. I'm just happy to see women not getting in their own way anymore.
Getting in their own way.
Not getting in their own way. Women get in their own way.
And do you
I know
think that's
probably taboo,
do you think
but
that's the fear and courage, that type of stuff?
I think it kind of goes back to exactly what she said. She explained it very well. It goes back to those female versus male stereotypes, right? So if women follow these, I'm a girl, so I need to do this stereotypes, they kind of become their own enemy, and they fall into these traps. And for me, it's these overtly emotional traps that I see a lot of women get into, especially when it comes to their money behaviors. I see that a lot. But I see us changing and kind of evolving and taking a leadership role. We're natural born leaders, so. And I think with that stigma, just exactly how you said it, that's going away. So we don't have to kind of feed into these social norms that were holding us back all this time, so.
I think I'm the pessimist in the group. Because the thing I fear at the end of the day is the transfer of information is the friction for transfer of information is just falling precipitously. It's so easy to tweet something or create a meme, and then half the world has retweeted it and has ingrained it permanently in their essence of being in 36 hours, and it's insane. And it's the reason I don't tweet, right? Because the concept that you have one sentence, which is basically, I don't know how, some people think very deeply about their tweets. I'm not capable about it. And then, it's ingrained forever as this, 240 characters or whatever, totally out of context forever. And it's your one truth that you will be held against. And so the thing that I fear at the end of the day in this new world and new narrative that we're moving in is that we have far fewer trusted sources of information, and we are rebelling against this hierarchy of information, and we are rebelling against journalism and thoughtful opinion pieces that are dual-sided. And so when we move into a media culture that goes from highly curated and very carefully disseminated for risk, right? And Jefferson basically said this country is going to be built on a postal system because that's how actually we'll get people to vote, and that's how you have to get information out to them, and I will subsidize the newspapers for as long as that has to happen. But that only works when you actually have very curated storytelling, and in a world where everyone gets to be their own publisher and scream their own truth, you have so much disinformation. And the number of people I meet who say insane things, and then when you press them on it, you cannot have a logical argument. There's no reasonable discourse, because they're like, I don't believe that. And you're like, this is true. Like, there's nothing to believe or disbelieve. It's factually correct. And they're like, I don't believe that. And it's men and women, and it freaks me out. I'm so scared.
You're talking about epistemic inconsistency. That's a word that I've been using now to talk about.
See, I can trust on Alan to just expand my vocabulary.
What
is it?
Epistemology is a study of what's
Yes.
justified truth versus just what's belief. And so there's society is dealing with just an unstable level of epistemic inconsistency. So you can't decipher, as you've pointed out, that the friction of information transfer is the lowest it's ever been. It's only going lower, and I'm happy that you bring up epistemic inconsistency, because it is one of the things that I'm also concerned with. And then how does that, how would you say that relates to the transition?
Well, I think that the thing that I fear is that transitions are not, at the end of the day, humans are like these very interesting pack animals, right? And like leaders arise and small groups gather around them, and pockets intersect in interesting ways. And we still struggle to share like empathy with each other. And so you just end up with these little cohorts. And so what I worry is that the heads of those cohorts end up telling the stories that promote their own narratives. And so while I do think that we're seeing a greater rise in the diversity of narratives, I'm not seeing a rise in like the quality of narrative.
And acceptance.
Really good. So in terms of, if we think about it in terms of really powerful nodes on a network, these really powerful nodes that exist in many cases are propagating the stories that they are finding to be most impactful or influential. And sometimes it's really important to take information from nodes that are linked to us to help build a greater narrative, one that's even more inclusive.
And I recognize that we're talking like 3 abstraction layers away from, like, and I'm sorry that, it's like a Friday night and I went there, but I think that if I give like a grounded example, I have peers and so I grew up in Eastern Europe, and I have brilliant peers who are kind of still back home, and when I'll chat with them about their worldview, like, my friends in Ukraine are having a hard time because their country's at war and no one talks about it. And then my friends in Russia so deeply believe that those guys in Ukraine are just idiots and basically deserve to be subservient. And these are not unintelligent people. These are just people for whom the propaganda has been so force-fed for so long that it doesn't register as anything other than a native truth. And that's horrifying, right? And you only get that perspective of distance, but I know for myself, because I'm a part of that social group, which is if I grew up in that part of Russia with those people, I don't know that I would have a different perspective.
You'd be in the same shoes. You'd have the same roll of dice. That is very scary, that the mind is so malleable, and then if you're force-fed those lies that propaganda.
Like, I'd love to say that I'd be above it, but realistically?
Yeah, we would all have fallen into the trap of the Nazi Germany type, we would have all.
Sorry, this got real dark real fast. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm glad we brought up epistemic inconsistency. But Nicole, yes, go ahead.
I think there's a couple of things. So,
tell me I'm wrong, please.
There's more to it.
Great.
There's more to it.
Yes, please.
A couple of things is that, one of the questions that you sent to us was like, what do you believe is true that less than 1% of the population believes is true? And one of the things, because in my line of work, often when I speak, and I speak a lot, people there's a sense of nostalgia that people have. They're like, oh, things used to be good. So like tech people are like, before Facebook. And then other people are like, before tech. And everyone's got this thing that like things used to be great. I don't think things used to be great. So I'm a African American female, and to get to great, I would have to go back to matrilineal Africa on the Serengeti. And everything between then and now sucked.
Yeah.
So it didn't used to be great. Or people are like, we used to be deeply in community. And it's like, well, yeah, a lot of domestic violence happened in those communities. A lot of other things that couldn't be discussed happened in those communities. So it isn't, but I don't believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But a really big thing is that around the world, we have never really been taught how to truly connect with one another. We haven't really been taught, and those are the skills of the future. And so I don't really mean it in sort of like a touchy-feely
Unpack,
kind of
connect.
way. Oh, yeah. Unpacking. Yeah. So,
the box cutter.
Yeah, so like
nuance.
the big frameworks. So let's just, like a lot of the big historical frameworks, the extent of human interaction, except in a couple of the esoteric branches, where thou shalt not blank. But how do you really, really connect? Because, and this is where I will, tie back to what you're saying, is that, I truly believe, and, and from when you sort of look at what people really, if you deconstruct a lot of what people are saying, or a lot of what people are doing, and I just was talking to someone who's done a study on, teens who do school shootings, and what are they really looking for? So much of it comes back to belonging and connection. And so, one of the things that is interesting that's happening with, the way a lot of our science is expanding right now is, the Darwinistic point of view of competition is now starting to be challenged. And one great example is, the secret life of trees and what actually happens in the forest. There's a huge amount of nature that is collaborative. And then everyone here who's in this room or watching, who's going to watch this on camera, your ancestors were extraordinary at collaboration. Mm-hmm. They could compete, but they also were great at collaboration. And so there's a whole section of our natures that are not amplified yet by technology. And I don't think technology is the solution, by the way. I don't think it's this panacea, but we have a very one-dimensional sort of approach. We're in the stone ages of what's coming.
Interesting.
And so in terms of like where people are at and how people so quickly, believe the worst of others, that is the skill level that they're at. That's where they're at. Will they always be that way? I don't think so, because I think that there's a larger percentage of human nature that desires to connect. You start it with respect. Respect is an indication of belonging. Mm-hmm. Those who non-belong died on the Serengeti. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a really big chunk of ours, and if we actually skill people, if we actually learn, and I don't know what these products are, I don't know how we do it yet. I know we don't do it at scale in our society today. I know that the skills that are related to connecting to one another are going to be the core for being able to be compensated in any way, whether it's tokens or something else in the future, and that anyone who doesn't have those skills will become irrelevant. And that is like one of the biggest issues that we have. So I'm incredibly optimistic, but I have a sense of urgency, and the future's not written, and it could go badly, but what else do you do with your time on Earth?
So for both of y'all, because you guys are on different ends, which is good, do you think that women have the abilities or the characteristics to kind of bring this change forward? From I guess like empathy, bringing empathy into the world and compassion into the world. Do you think that women are leading that, or is it just non-gender issue.
I just talked for a long time, so why don't you go?
I would like the answer to be that it's non-gendered, because I think that actually creates a sustainable solution.
Right.
So I think for me, where I'm extremely optimistic is that particularly Western societies are becoming far more amenable to different definitions of self. And so, right, like we have, right, in the last 10 years, I've learned all these new words for cis, non-gendered, like,
Non-gender conforming.
yeah, right, the whole spectrum, and I apologize to all of those people that I don't know all of your vocabulary as well as I should. But I think that as we gain more acceptance for different ways in which people decide to define themselves and the space that they kind of take up, that's who ends up leading the charge, right, is the people who, I would almost say that it's going to come from that community and the communities that are closest to it rather than our classic definition of male, female, in the sense that you almost have to be more on the fringe to like raise the flag and say, no, this actually looks fundamentally different. If you're going to connect with me, you have to like lay all that stuff on the side and have a very open conversation that is going to be out of your comfort zone, and you're not going to know what pronoun to use, and that's fine. And I see that happening, and right in my own very tiny sliver worldview is that like a lot of the women I run into are some of the toughest people I've ever worked with, because I had this woman tell me once that like, you know, she basically put on armor every day, and it, you know, wasn't actually like a chainmail, but it really felt like armor for her. And then she was a very different person in her working life and in her work. And a lot of the female mentors that I've had have absolutely felt like that person. And so what I fear is that for some of the women who are in some higher echelons, like particularly in academia, not only are they not leading the charge, but they are like raising the next generation that is not going to lead the charge because they've learned how to function very well in a world that doesn't accept them. And I do think there's a second wave coming, but I would like it to be more of a kind of bipartisan approach. But yeah, like, wouldn't that be great, you know, if everyone just kind of linked hands and said, like, let's have a more open conversation?
But
Yeah,
Nicole, can I quick
yeah.
on the way? I like the sustainability aspect of that, which is that moving forward together is the most sustainable. And then also, just Nicole, what you mentioned earlier about the way that trees, you were pointing at, the way that they engage and share resources and help one another under soil systems, and even the way that we could potentially learn from things like that and incorporate that into the way that we cooperate versus compete, or how do we have a symbiosis between those two things. That seems to be a lot of the transition that we're talking about, is competition and cooperation and figuring out a symbiosis there. Were you kind of directing a little bit of energy towards figuring that out as part of the transition?
Well, I mean, I think that that's what's happening. And, you know, I think that, you know, so like one of the things that, an article that I read the other day that was just, it was last year, it was kind of crazy. And this is only known, it's only approached in mice models. It hasn't been proven in humans in any way at all. But basically it was a guy, to make it a very brief explanation, it was a guy who was genetically engineering mice and wasn't getting the yield of the genetic trait that he was trying to get, that one should statistically get. And it opened up this entire level of inquiry that the mouse egg might be choosing. You know, because like statistically he should have had a higher yield, but something was happening. And then he called up everybody else who was doing mouse models, and they all assumed that their yield issues had to do with something else. And I only pull that forward as an example of, you know, we have so many beliefs about how things are that are based on a very limited view of how our world works, how our bodies work, how, our social signaling to one another actually works, how nature works. And these things are, have really defined, competition of the fittest. Well, it's actually the most adaptable, and there's actually a whole lot of, it's competition of the most collaborative in many ways. And so I think that we have these things that we've hung our whole belief systems on that aren't actually true or only partially true. And so I think that is starting to change. I think one of the other things that's going to have a huge impact is the life extension. And, one of the things that's about to happen, Mary Lou and I were at the Brain Mind Summit, and one of the people as were you, very soon you're going to have families where you have 5 generations alive at the same time. That's even before we get into the crazy life extension of humans living 180 to 200 years. Like within the next 10 years, you'll have 5 generations alive at the same time. Never happened before. And so I think, when we start to have longer lifespans, the idea of like, what is gender, what are relationships, a lot of other things are going to be on the table. And it still, again, comes back to, we have no skills. We have no skills, we have no social skills, we haven't really explored how to do this. You have to be extremely lucky to get people who teach you how to truly connect. And that's a problem for humanity. And so a really great application of, technology and education is to start to work on that. And if we can do that, then maybe we get out of having these polarized inabilities to talk to one another, because once you can actually talk to another person, you discover that you have way more in common with them, than not, in terms of being a human. And then that's really how, and I don't think empathy is I don't think that it's a gendered thing. I think women are allowed to have it more than men, but I know plenty of men and my daddy was from Mississippi, and I grew up in Texas, and I was surrounded by a lot of men who had giant, juicy hearts. So it's not, about, like West Coast men or San Francisco guys. It's not that at all. And so I think things are changing, but, it's just we're in the crunch. It's happening now.
I'll ask this question. We can start with Mckenzie. How can we best inspire and respect women that are coming of age?
I'm going to go back to what she said, because she's been saying so many incredible things. I don't think it really matters if you get respect or not. You said that in the very beginning.
I mean, I'd like respect.
Yeah, we'd like respect, but you're not going to get
but
it from everybody.
But if you make me choose, I'll take opportunity.
Yeah, you're not going to get it from everybody. And it's something that I'm experiencing too, with all these things that we're doing in beyond capital markets too. And some people respect what me and Tali, my business partner, she's female too. We're 2 females doing things that, and people, when we talk to people, it's like they look at us like we got 4 heads. They just don't understand like how these 2 Black women are doing all these incredible things. We're working in the Eastern Caribbean. We're writing helping to write the legislation for new securities laws in the Eastern Caribbean that governs 8 countries, including the British Virgin Islands. And in the Caribbean, it's statistically about men. Their culture is heavily men, and it's the men that do these things, and it's two women that are doing these things instead. So I think for us, we're just used to we're used to being criticized. We're used to not getting that respect from the people that we want to get it from, or we'll get it from them way later down the road. It has something that has to be earned. And so I would tell women to just be patient, and also just learn to be comfortable in your own skin. I think that's the most important thing over patience. Just learn spend more time with yourself and learn to, I'm an only child, so I did that a lot.
Oh, nice.
So I'm more than okay with myself. And I would say I'm the best person that I know. I'm not narcissistic, but it's just the only child thing. But
Mckenzie loves Mckenzie. What up?
yeah, but yeah, I think women don't spend enough time alone and with themselves and being comfortable in their own skin. And so I would say that would be my my recommendation.
And then what would a society look like ideally that could help foster that sort of comfortability in their own skin? That spend more time with self-work, that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, how do you do that? How do you embrace that, or how do you promote that in a society? That's a really good question. I have no idea.
Nicole, Mariana?
I would say whatever she's doing sounds really cool, the transforming stuff. We need more of that. I think we need more of that. I do meditate a lot every day as well. I think that helps a lot. I think that traveling helps, learning and seeing how other people live is very important.
Even traveling in socioeconomics, you know.
Yeah, difference, yeah. And then, like for me, because I've just been in the Caribbean so much, that was a big eye-opener for me, because I'm just the most basic American you could think of. Starbucks in the morning, you know, I stress shop at Target. I need my brands. I need a white picket fence. I need there to be structure and clean. Like I like America, you know, I like that part of America. And then when you go to the Caribbean and you see people that are beyond poor, and then left you see people beyond poor, and right side you see people in these really nice resorts, and you're like, what the heck? This is really not, this is not how nobody on this planet is supposed to be living, so.
And we have that right here with Rincon Hill and
Yeah.
the Tenderloin. We have that right here.
Yeah, when Uber dropped me off, because I did a Uber, what is that, Uber Express pool or whatever, and they drop you off down the street, not where you're supposed to be. It was like a homeless convention that they dropped me off at. And I'm like, wait, what is this? Where's my hotel? But that should not be happening. Hopefully that will, hopefully that will go away with more people being conscious about and more self-aware and aware of other people as well. So.
What about you guys? What do you think?
There was a lot in that, and I'm almost gonna especially your ending comments. I deeply agree. I think that we're entering several transition periods. Like we're entering a really interesting transition period in the U.S. where every subsequent generation will not do as well or better than the prior.
Maybe.
But like the middle class America in the next this next couple of decades are going to be very interesting. It's not inherently obvious that you will have, with so much foreign investment, particularly coming into real estate, it becomes really, really hard for lower socioeconomically stabilized families to have the same access to buy homes and to gain equity through real estate. And so I do think that there is going to be some, and like maybe it'll get better if you game out the system long enough, but I think in this next, 50, 100 years, you're going to see an interesting transition where you're going to see a generation that had every expectation to do significantly better than their parents and might not. And that's not going to be true everywhere, and it's slightly less true on the coast. Well, it's actually very true on the coast, right? Like who can afford a house in San Francisco? It's crazy.
Right.
So I think that's going to lead to a whole bunch of interesting social challenges and social awarenesses and a different gaming out of people's expectations and roles in society. I think one thing that I'm extremely optimistic about is I'm a mentor in like the first robotics programs, and I spend a lot of time
Love them.
Working with, particularly with young women in the robotics space, because it's something I care deeply about, and I was, the only person in my classes when I was taking them, and that wasn't that long ago, and I find that really frustrating. And now I turn around and it's like, there's a team in a co-ed school where the entire kind of varsity robotics team is all girls and they're crushing it, right?
Yes.
And it's not because they were like championed or told that they should participate more, it's because they were actually smarter. And they were just, right, they just did better.
Yeah.
And so like in a blind selection process, you have these teams coming forward. I think the thing that frustrates me to no end is, does everybody like remember that Google manifesto that guy wrote where he's like,
Yeah.
oh, women are actually less capable of doing math? He wrote a lot more than that, but that was the gist of it. I actually printed it out just so I could throw it against a wall, and then I felt really bad about all the trees. But I was so angry, I was so livid, and I was like, I cannot believe I live in a time where, you know, a social peer of mine, like not that we're friends, but like the guy's probably about my age, and I was like, man, I'm just gonna physically strangle him if I ever run into him, and that's not acceptable at all. But I think the thing that I freaked out about, and I literally lost my mind. I was not like a sane person the week that came out and all the half-baked news stories around it. But the thing that made me feel better is the amount of people, and particularly men in my social circles, who were like, yeah, that guy's crazy. Like, straight up, he is nuts. That is unacceptable, and like he should be totally shunned. And in some ways, their arguments weren't that informed either, which was slightly frustrating. I was like, could we have like a real discussion about this? That would be interesting.
Oh, so interesting.
But it's hard, right? Because almost like in San Francisco, it's like you have to be so committed to a particular mindset that if you don't have that mindset, you can't actually have, like, I feel bad for any conservatives who live here,
It's a
because like you
monoculture.
can't actually have a conversation.
In many ways,
But I found it interesting to say that I do feel like a larger social shift, that smell that you were saying, where it was like, that was a really unacceptable thing to do. And we could have had a far more nuanced discussion about the point he was making and the ways in which he felt marginalized in his society and his group. But instead, everyone was like, nope, you're nuts. And so I was like, oh, that's a good monumental shift, right? Because that wouldn't have happened 20 years ago.
Maybe not even 5.
Not even 5, honestly. Like, certainly, the same stuff happened when I was in university. It just was a little quieter, and like Twitter wasn't around. But yeah, nobody was in support, right? Nobody was the rallying cry. People were like, oh yeah, you are worse at math.
Yeah, it's like one of those things. It's like, you know, I'm not the first person to make this point, but you know that like today it's sort of globally considered not a great thing to have slaves.
Yeah.
You know, but
we talked about ethics evolving at
yeah,
Brainmind. Yeah.
but go back not that far, and it was completely acceptable.
Yeah.
To have slaves. And so, you know, so it's like the fact that, like, when I see a large number of people horrified about things across, you know, that's a broader demographic than just a small slice, then that's when you can see, you know, that things are changing. And to your question, Alan, about how do we change things for younger women, or just younger people in general, is I would say that if you're a woman and if you're a woman, be visible, because so much has to do with representation. Like, I am obsessed about the brain. If I had known one neuroscientist, male or female, in college, you'd all call me Dr. Bradford. Like, really, like that's what I would have done. Because I'm obsessed about the brain, and like I would have done that. But I didn't know anyone who was doing it. So it wasn't something that was even in my frame of reference. And so if you're a woman, if you're female, be visible, because there's someone out there who will see you doing your thing, and it will give them a sense of possibility for themselves that they didn't have. And you might never meet that person. You might never know who that person is. And
See
then,
it, be it.
yeah, and then also, you know, men doing something interesting about changing the world and getting us all on Team Human. Be visible.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Be visible, because there's men and women out there who are going to see what you're doing, and it's going to change their realm of what's possible. So everybody who's on like the side of Team Human, be visible.
I love that. All right, and a couple quick questions on the way out. I want to ask you 3, what is the deepest emotion you've ever felt? The question? Why am I? Oh, what am I asking, or why?
Why?
Yeah. So a lot of what we do on simulation is we ask some of humanity's deepest or maybe most thought-provoking questions, and we think this question came a long time ago, and we ask it on the show occasionally, and it's one of a couple that we have here on the way out. But just really curious what you guys think.
That's really easy for me. Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the interesting thing. The question was, can I answer the question? Thanks, John. Here's the thing about me answering the questions that I ask is that I actually don't have answers. That's the interesting thing. That's why I asked the questions.
Polling.
Yeah, it's Alan's polling. Yeah. So maybe eventually, when I take in enough inputs throughout life, I will finally come up with something that I think is an okay answer to that question. But it's very difficult to do so. What do you guys say?
I'll start. For me, it's really easy. It's anger, because I don't get angry very much. But when I do, I get angry because I think I'm expecting too much from humans. And so when they do something totally different from my expectations of what a human should do, it just pisses me off. Mm-hmm. So, because I don't have an understanding, and I'm angry because I don't have understanding as to why they made that decision. Because that's not the right way to say that. Any human that is for humans, like you said, would not do certain things, and so that really just pisses me off. So.
What do you feel when you're at your peak anger?
I feel confusion because I don't understand why they made that decision. So, it's just like the issue that we talked about when I first got here, right? I was really angry about that, so I really can't talk about it because it's a legal situation. But
is that more of an inward feeling or an outward feeling, the anger?
I think it's an inward feeling. It's not an outward. Feeling. So, and I'm not talking about when a human litters or something like that. I'm talking about when a human embezzles money or fires somebody that shouldn't be fired. Like extreme things, right? That just will deeply affect someone else or a family or a community. That pisses me off.
You too?
For me, it's fear, and I find fear to be a really interesting experience, because for me, it's like fear is this immense full body thing, and fear is often closely coupled with the adrenaline surge that comes thereafter. So if anybody who knows me or spends time with me knows that I get obsessive with things like that, like fear, and so I spend a lot of my free time riding motorcycles and climbing and kite surfing and surfing and generally just
it a little. Are you trying to tackle it?
So I think it's a really interesting thing, because I think the thing that I find most fascinating about fear is that you can just turn it off. Like you can forget that you have fear, which is a really wild experience, right? You can do the same thing 2 days in a row, and one day you're scared out of your mind, and the next day you're just too tired to remember that it was horrifying. And I just find that to be such a useful experience for me in the rest of my daily life, because as a VC, I'm the steward of somebody else's capital, which is the most horrifying thing to think about, right? Like the responsibility and the pressure and the expectation and the self-serving goals of wouldn't it be nice to invest in something that changes the world somehow for the better? Those are so panic-inducing for me that I have built a life around exploring that emotion of fear and figuring out how to harness the adrenaline surge and dampen the panic state. But I live in some continual ping pong between the two, to be honest.
The continual game of ping pong.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Which is funny because my fiance comes home, and the way I take stress out if I don't if I can't actually, you know, like go ride a motorbike around or something, is I'll just like obsessively start cleaning and organizing. If I'm in the garage, like, you know, reshelving all the tools, he's like, ooh, something is like terribly wrong. Yeah, so I think it's like it's a full body visceral experience. And I feel you on the anger, but for me, my anger is just not useful. Like when I'm angry, I'm just in a blind rage. Like I can't like do anything. Because then I take to like getting like physically violent, and that's not good for like me or anyone else.
I've become a philosopher. I'm like,
yeah,
asking all these
you got to
questions.
teach me how to do that. Like no amount of meditation doesn't want to make me just like punch a wall.
Yeah, for fear, you're right about fear, especially in the space that we're in. But I probably shouldn't say this, but I take a lot of supplements. I just, you know,
You're not alone.
A lot of trips to the vitamin shop to help me with that, and I just literally just tune it out. Just tune it out.
Nicole?
Love. I think love is the most powerful emotion there is. I think that my experience of love is like the face of the sun. I think that our society has a sense that you know, and not to this is completely separate, but I think our society says that anger and fear are stronger because it seems more of a point. But the way that I think of it is it's like a headlight that's got mud on it. And so people feel like love is very diffuse because you can only see a little bit of it through the mud. And then, so you fall in love with someone and it's like a scratch. So there's a lot of light in that point, but everything else is diffuse. But one of the things that happens is that, you know, as we peel our layers, and a lot of it's mind training and a bunch of other things, but, you know, as you go through the process, that headlight gets, the mud comes off, and then the love is like the face of the sun. Mm-hmm. And that power, you know, before I did what I'm doing now, I used to run I operated a really large video game. I operated World of Warcraft China. It was the largest stub of the largest game at the time. And so I have a big business background and all of that. And then I went on a meditation retreat, and I walked out of that retreat happier than I'd ever been and completely unafraid, like zero fear. I later found out that it had a lot to do with a dramatic decline in rumination, which is basically the inner chatter that mostly like says everything's gonna go wrong and that's what's going on.
Decline in rumination.
Yeah, rumination. And so it's like, you know, that is what propelled me to really dig into psychology, neuroscience, and wanting to use technology to help people get to that place, because it was all about being on the back end of World of Warcraft was all about scale and tech and data and community and connection, people having like great relationships. So I don't have an immune response on technology and humanity at all, because I saw it. I lived it for 6 years in China. And so for me now, you know, after I wasn't afraid is when I found out, like, it wasn't until I wasn't afraid that I realized how much fear drove my life. And it wasn't until I was happy that I realized that before I was optimistic and I wasn't actually happy. So, you know, having that experience, now today I am more driven by love than I was by fear. I am more driven by like love of humanity and you know, what I think is possible, and all my business instincts and all of that stuff goes to, you know, need, demand, and means. And I think we have an opportunity. I think we're at a rare moment in time that hasn't happened before, but is happening now. The next 10 to 15 years matter the most. We're laying the railroad track or we're setting the future for whether or not we get Hunger Games or Starfleet. That's what's happening right now. And love gets me out of bed in the morning. Love, you know,
as powerful as the face of the
love
sun.
does 5 hours of sleep. Love, you know, like love writes that last email. It's all about love right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Starfleet
beautiful.
or Hunger Games. That's a pretty interesting binary vision. And
Well, I mean, they're turkeys in Starfleet, and they're good people in Hunger Games. So
That's
it's not
true.
completely
That's true.
binary,
Yeah.
but it's like, you know, I'm really driven by the handover, right?
Yeah.
Like we are responsible to have a handover that we, you know, that you know, we can. I don't want to say proud of because it's very egoic, but we're responsible to have a good handover.
We're stewards, and
Yeah.
we're born into electricity and running water and ubiquity and food and education and all this other kind of stuff. And it's just like, people worked really hard to give that to us, and so now it's up to us to leave behind a really even better world. Okay, last question. How do you use intuition in your life?
Oh, this is a hard question. I think true intuition, you don't even recognize you're using it, especially the type of person I am. I'm really good at logic overlays, and so I'll like have an emotion and then be very, very fast to rationalize it. And I'm particularly good at that. Like, if you need me, I will create a story for you, and it's fine. But I think I use intuition in every moment, right? Like, my job is sitting all day and having really bright-eyed and bushy-tailed entrepreneurs come in and say, here's why I'm going to change the world, and here's why I'm particularly well-suited to do so. And I have to basically make a snap character judgment on very limited information, like wildly limited information. And it's a really scary job because you sit in this very arbitrary judgment seat. And it's absolutely, like, at the end of the day, for me, it's intuition. And the way that I think about it is there's lots of brilliant investors out there, and there are some people who I will work very, very well with, and that's the reason that they happen to walk in the store, and we align on interest and vision and ability to work together, and we'll build something beautiful together. And there's lots of people who are great people who I have no business working with, and that's why I'm going to have a particular reaction to them. And then there's lots of people who are kind of terrible people, and I might pick up on that too, and like, let's not invest in them either. And so I think that I feel all of those things, and I feel them faster than I can recognize them, and then I'll be busy layering on top all of the reasons that I believe that, right? And you start overlaying, like, well, this person said this thing, and they showed up wearing this, but at the end of the day, you just have like some gut reaction to like pheromones or whatever the chemical reaction is that happened to be a mix of your brain and their brain and whatever you had for breakfast that day. And I think that's the craziest part, is it, like, so much is just circumstance and luck and timing. And I think intuition just helps you sort yourself out and happen to be in the right place at the right time, if you listen to it. Or you can totally shut it out and just, right? I'm sure we all know people who are just on rails and like just stopped listening to all outside input. And sometimes they're wildly successful, but most of the time they're basically brutes. And sometimes they become really difficult to engage with. But they can be wildly successful if you're very intent on being on a particular set of rails. Sorry, that was long-winded. So much for short answers.
You good?
Yeah. I think I'm 100% led by that. So you can call it, you know, a lot of us Black women call us our spirit-led women, you know.
That's beautiful.
Or we're God-led women, universe,
Spirit-led.
whatever you want to call it.
Spirit-led, I like that. Can we get a
For
t-shirt?
now, I've been using the word universe, so we're going to go with that. But I mean, it leads to everything that I do. Because when I don't, bad things happen and things get out of order. So
Tell us about that feeling. How do you tap into the spirit feeling or the universe feeling? How are you led by that? What does it mean to go off of that feeling and bad things happen?
Right. Well, I think for me, just growing up in a Christian household has kind of helped set that foundation. I don't go to church anymore and all that. I've woken up from that. But I think that there's some roots in it, some basic spiritual principles that I learned at a very young age that I was able to carry over into meditation. So I like to mix things up. So that's how I process it. And just because I've been doing it for so long, it just It just naturally turns on. It's on all the time. So much to the point a lot of people actually think I'm clairvoyant. I don't think I'm clairvoyant. I just think that I figured out how to listen and how to be still when I need to be still, and how to be still while you're still walking down the street and, you know, and living during the day, so.
It's good how to be still when you're walking down the street, you know?
Yeah, when you still got to get things done and make decisions as the CEO of a company and stuff like that, or, you know, especially for us, we decided to bootstrap and not take investor capital. It's a really weird, as an entrepreneur, I'm anti-VC, but as a VC,
I get it.
but I am also a VC, so it's really, I'm in a really weird place in fintech, but as us women, we felt like in order to protect our interests in our own company and the innovations, the financial innovations that we're creating, to bootstrap, I mean, you have to have a lot of faith to go to Kenya with like less than $100 in your pocket and just know that everything's going to be okay when you get there, right? So that's intuition telling you it's going to be okay. And it was okay once we got there, but stuff like that, that's how I use intuition in building my companies and stuff. So when it looks doom and gloom, just it's that little voice telling you that everything's going to be okay, right? Don't freak out. Just you know, just work it out and just keep going. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I'm going to be super quick. I use the biology. So, you know, on the Serengeti, like we all developed the ability to, you know, like the most important things were to know like who you could trust, who you could ally with, and, you know, and other things like that. And so, you know, we have 122 facial expressions, but we only control 9. When you are talking to someone and they like what you're saying, their pupils dilate slightly, something that you can't even, you know, you like consciously you don't pick it up, but your body picks it up because we were designed to pick that, or not designed, we evolved to be able to pick that up. And so when one of the benefits of meditation is that when you're not running a lot of inner chatter, you can actually like sense what your body picks up. We're broadcasting constantly, and people are constantly broadcasting to us. So now that I understand that, and I can be incredibly quiet, like when I'm talking to someone, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm totally there. And so as a result, it's like, and then when you're listening to what your body thinks about the person, you get like tons of information. Mm-hmm. And also when you're really listening to someone, they'll tell you everything. So, you know, you don't even, it doesn't even, they'll just tell you everything if you really, really listen. Yeah. So, that's it.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Wow. This is definitely one of my favorite times. I love this so much, you know, I do. And
Thank you for having us.
We got to do this more often. You know, Women in Alliance #2. Let's go. Let's get it going. You know, let's get the production rolling. We should do a monthly thing. This is the first panel. Yeah. Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
Shout out to Ron for directing and producing.
Thanks,
and there's still a lot to explore and unpack and understand and embody and bring it into our practice on Earth. So thank you. Yes, round of applause. Thank you.